Anchoring bias. Anchoring bias is a psychological trap where an individual relies heavily on the first piece of information they encounter, the anchor, when making decisions. This initial information unduly influences subsequent judgments, even if it's irrelevant or misleading. For example, if you see a shirt priced at $100 and then another at $50, you might perceive the second shirt as cheap, even if $50 is still expensive. Availability heuristic. Availability heuristic is a cognitive shortcut where people estimate the likelihood of an event based on how easily examples come to mind. If something can be recalled quickly, individuals tend to believe it is more common or likely than it actually is. For instance, after seeing news reports about airplane accidents, someone might overestimate the risk of flying, even though such accidents are rare. Bandwagon effect. The bandwagon effect is when individuals adopt certain behaviors, styles, or attitudes simply because others are doing so. This tendency to follow the crowd can be seen in various contexts, such as fashion trends, political opinions, or consumer choices. People are influenced by the popularity of an option rather than its intrinsic value or personal preference. Base rate fallacy. The base rate fallacy is a cognitive error where people ignore or undervalue general statistical information, base rates, in favor of specific information. For example, if given statistics about a disease's prevalence, base rate, and a specific case's symptoms, people might overestimate the likelihood of the disease based on the symptoms alone, neglecting the base rate. Confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is when individuals favor information that confirms their pre-existing beliefs or assumptions, while disregarding or downplaying evidence that contradicts them. Someone who believes a particular diet is effective might focus on success stories and ignore studies showing mixed results. Dunning-Kruger Effect. The Dunning-Kruger Effect is when individuals with low ability or knowledge in a specific area overestimate their competence, while those with higher ability often underestimate their competence. Conversely, skilled individuals may assume tasks that are easy for them are also easy for others, leading to underestimation of their abilities. Endowment Effect. The endowment effect is where people ascribe higher value to things merely because they own them. This leads individuals to demand more money to give up an object than they would be willing to pay to acquire it in the first place. Someone might require $50 to sell a mug they own, but wouldn't pay more than $20 to buy the same mug. Framing effect. The framing effect is a trap where people's choices are influenced by how information is presented or framed. The same information presented in different ways can lead to different decisions. Presenting a choice as a loss or as a gain can alter decision-making even if the options themselves are identical. Fundamental attribution error. The fundamental attribution error is where people tend to attribute others' actions to internal characteristics or traits while overlooking situational factors. Essentially, individuals often overemphasize the influence of personal qualities and underestimate the impact of external circumstances when explaining the behavior of others. For instance, if someone fails a test, one might assume it's because they're lazy or unintelligent, neglecting the possibility that they were under stress or had inadequate study materials. Gambler's fallacy. The gambler's fallacy is where individuals believe that past random events can influence the outcomes of future random events. If a coin lands on heads multiple times in a row, someone might incorrectly believe that tails is more likely to occur next to balance the outcome. In reality, each coin flip is independent of the previous ones, and the probability of heads or tails remains the same with each flip. Hindsight bias. Hindsight bias is a trap where people perceive events as having been more predictable after they have occurred than they actually were before they happened. In other words, individuals tend to believe that they knew it all along once an outcome is known, even if they didn't anticipate it before. Illusion of control. The illusion of control is a cognitive trap where individuals believe they have more control over outcomes than they actually do. Even in situations where their actions have little to no influence on the result, people may still perceive a sense of control. Someone might believe they can influence a coin toss by how they flip the coin, despite the outcome being purely random. Information bias. Information bias is when individuals seek excessive information, even when it may not be relevant or useful for making decisions. This bias can lead to information overload, decision paralysis, or a distorted perception of the situation. A person might spend an excessive amount of time researching minor details about a product before making a purchase, even though the additional information doesn't significantly impact their decision. Loss aversion. Loss aversion is where individuals prefer avoiding losses over acquiring equivalent gains. In other words, the pain of losing something is felt more strongly than the pleasure of gaining something of equal value. This bias can lead to risk aversion and reluctance to take actions that might result in losses, even if the potential gains outweigh the potential losses. Someone might hold on to a losing stock investment longer than they should because they fear realizing the loss more than they desire to avoid further losses. Mental accounting. Mental accounting is a mind trap where individuals categorize and treat money differently based on various factors, such as its source, intended use, or emotional significance. Instead of viewing money as fungible, people compartmentalize it into mental categories, each with its own rules and restrictions. For instance, someone might separate their income into different accounts for necessities, leisure, and savings, allocating money differently to each category based on perceived importance or urgency. Mental accounting can lead to suboptimal financial decisions, such as overspending in one category while neglecting others, or failing to take advantage of opportunities to maximize utility. Negativity bias. Negativity bias is a cognitive bias where individuals pay more attention to and give more weight to negative experiences or information compared to positive ones. This bias can lead people to be more affected by negative events, memories, or feedback, even when positive aspects are also present. A person might dwell on a single criticism in an otherwise positive performance review, overlooking praise and constructive feedback. Normalcy bias. Normalcy bias is when individuals underestimate the possibility of a disaster or crisis occurring because they assume that things will continue to function as they normally have in the past. This can lead people to underestimate the potential risks of an impending threat and fail to take appropriate action to prepare for or respond to it. For example, someone might ignore evacuation warnings during a natural disaster because they believe it's unlikely to happen to them or that the situation will quickly return to normal. Optimism bias. Optimism bias is where individuals overestimate the likelihood of positive outcomes and underestimate the likelihood of negative outcomes. This leads people to believe that they are less likely to experience negative events and more likely to experience positive ones compared to others. Someone might believe they are less likely to get into a car accident than the average person, despite statistical evidence showing otherwise. Ostrich Effect. The Ostrich Effect is a mind trap where individuals ignore or avoid negative or threatening information, similar to how an ostrich might bury its head in the sand to avoid danger. It leads people to avoid facing uncomfortable realities or acknowledging risks, even when doing so would be beneficial. A person might ignore warning signs about their health or financial situation to avoid dealing with potential problems. Overconfidence Effect. The overconfidence effect is a cognitive bias where individuals overestimate their own abilities, knowledge, or judgments, believing they are more accurate or capable than they truly are. This bias can lead people to take excessive risks, make poor decisions, or fail to consider alternative viewpoints. For example, someone might believe they are better drivers than average, despite evidence suggesting otherwise, leading them to take unnecessary risks on the road. Placebo Effect. The placebo effect is a phenomenon where a person experiences a perceived improvement in symptoms or condition after receiving a treatment that has no therapeutic effect. This improvement occurs because the individual believes the treatment will work, often due to factors such as expectation, suggestion, or conditioning. Planning fallacy. The planning fallacy is where individuals consistently underestimate the amount of time, resources, or effort required to complete a task or project. Despite past experiences, people tend to be overly optimistic in their predictions about how long it will take to finish a task. For example, someone might underestimate the time needed to complete a project and end up rushing to finish it at the last minute. Recency Effect. The recency effect is when individuals tend to better remember and give greater importance to the most recent information they encounter when making decisions or forming opinions. In a job interview, a candidate's performance in the final stage of the interview process might disproportionately influence the hiring decision, even if their overall performance was mediocre. If you enjoyed this video, hit that subscribe button and leave us a like. See you next time.